I'm Ashley Redmond from Morningstar.ca, and I'm here with equity analyst Dan Werner. Dan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
So in 2012, we actually filmed a video about the potential housing bubble in Canada. Your concerns at the time were the frothy market conditions. Mm-hmm. So I want to know, are you still concerned?
The conditions really haven't changed since 2012. We're still in a very low interest rate environment, which has fueled the housing bubble. And the Bank of Canada has kept its benchmark rate at about 1%. That has led the banks to keep their mortgage rates low. As a result, we still have housing inflation in Canada. Average house prices increased about 20% since 2012. And the reason why that we still have low rates is, you look at the overall Canadian economy, you have GDP, 1.7, 1.8% each of the last 2 years. You still have unemployment about 7%, 7.5%, kind of in that range. And really the Bank of Canada isn't incentivized to increase rates at this point because of the overall economy. That has led to the housing inflation. So, to answer your question, it is still frothy, and with the average house price at $390,000, it still looks like it's going to keep increasing.
Okay, and is there one bank that concerns you more than the others? So one that's more heavily involved in mortgages?
I would say the banks in order that concern me are CIBC and Royal, and maybe I'd say Scotia as a close third. You look at the overall exposure of residential, all the Canadian banks, at least the top five, 55% of their loans are in residential mortgages on average. If you look at CIBC and compare their mortgage book to their overall capital levels, tangible capital levels, it's almost 900%. If you look at the uninsured portion that's not insured by the CMHC, it's still over 250% for CIBC as well as for Royal. So there's still some significant exposure by the banks to residential mortgage.
Okay, and I think we covered most of the issues, but is there any other issues you can think of that the Canadian economy is facing right now that worries you?
I think when we look at housing in Canada, we take a look at other factors as well. We look at the demographics of what's going on in Canada. I've looked at the net fertility rates and see that it's 1.5 right now. Normally, you need, in most industrialized countries, you need a 2.1 to maintain your population. But Canada's been growing in population over the last several years. So where is it coming from? It's coming from immigration. So we took a look at what the net population growth was and compared that to the housing starts. And we came up with a 1.3 persons per new housing start in Canada over the last couple of years. Well, the average person per household in Canada is currently 2.4. So it seems that the construction is easily meeting the immigration and net population growth, and that's a concern. Another way to look at it, another thing that we've looked at is how much construction is a percent of the overall workforce in Canada, and that has been steadily increasing since the financial crisis, from about 5.5% to over 7%. Over the same time frame, the U.S. has fallen, obviously, because construction's fallen off. But even then, the U.S. peaked at about 5.5% construction jobs for the total workforce in 2007. So construction seems to be a big part of the Canadian economy, and it is a concern should there be some sort of economic shock.
And when you take a look at the landscape now, are you more concerned than you were in 2012 and 2013?
Well, I don't know if it's more concerned. I would probably say as concerned in terms of, is it worse now than it was then? I say it depends upon who you are. If you were a homeowner in 2012 to 2014, you probably love it. Your house is appreciated very nicely. If you're a home buyer, you're not loving it, and it's becoming much more difficult for you to purchase a home. So I think it depends upon where you're sitting.
Okay. And last time we talked about this, again in 2012 when we filmed a similar video, we actually got a lot of negative feedback on it. So are you the only one that's concerned about this, or are there other organizations or people that you can cite that also have similar concerns?
There's constant press about the inflated housing in Canada, but you have the International Monetary Fund has come out and said, you know what, yes, their economists have said housing is inflated in Canada. Maybe not to the extent that others. They say it's overpriced by about 10%. Then you have the Organization of Economic and Cooperative Development, the OECD. Their economists have come out and said it's 30% overpriced. I think it depends upon who you talk to, what their opinions are, what kind of model and assumptions they have. But it's kind of the general thesis, the general conclusion is that it still is overpriced.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Check out more commentary. Go to the stocks page of Morningstar.ca.